Are you ready?
Yeah.
I'm admitting all. Wonderful. Well, I am so pleased this evening to see everyone that's now from the waiting room into the meeting. Welcome. I'm Carolina Wheat, curator at Artfare, amongst other hats. This is ALYSSA Taylor Wendt we have tonight. What a pleasure to be here talking to you and getting to know more about your practice. You've been on Artfare for a little bit now, and I'm really happy that you're on this space and the platform because, as I'm curating these shows every week, um, I'm looking at the varied amount of artists. We have 620 artists on there, and you really so many artists stand out, right? Yet you really stood out to me too because of so much of the multidimensional work that you do, Alyssa, and kind of having to put that all together and put it in this kind of commercial or marketplace app must have been a little like, should I do this? I'm just wondering, like, what was your motivation, or what did you see the benefit for Artfare? Like, talk to me a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Carolina and Artfare, for having me here today. I love sharing my work and talking about my work. Yeah, I do make big things. I make big projects. I am a multidisciplinary artist who primarily works in video, photography, sculpture, and performance. And so a lot of it is really hard to represent, especially with just a few images online. I generally show in galleries, small museums, art centers, and they're usually like huge, multi-channel video screens or big installations or 18-foot mobiles. So it was sort of hard, but I tried to pick a nice array of things that represented different projects. I do have a project-based practice. And, the mediums I use are really dependent on what that project is. So I tried to represent some different things. And I think my big motivation was getting reconnected with New York, my beloved New York City. So I was born in New York City, and I spent a lot of time there in the 80s because I'm that old. And I moved back in 2002, and I lived there for about 10 years when I went back for grad school. And I really miss it. I currently live and work in Austin, Texas, and Detroit, Michigan. I live in both places, complicated.
Yeah.
And I really, one of my dearest little chosen family of friends lives in New York. So I stay very connected. I come to New York all the time. Of course, a lot of my artistic inspiration and, basis, like my formative years were really in New York. So I felt like this was a little bit of a way for me to, have one foot in New York again. And also be part of a community of, the majority New York artists. So I do have a lot of friends in New York that are artists, but this was sort of, people I knew and a lot of people I don't know. So it's just nice to be part of a new community, and I like what you guys are doing. So.
Thank you. That's awesome. I wasn't exactly fishing for compliments. I felt, as someone that does multi-channel film, installation based, you're curating, you're doing these film stills, as well as, veering into ceramics and other vessels, which we'll get into. It was just a real, a sight for sore eyes, in other words, to be able to see that dynamic practice that's process-based and certainly very heavily research-based and very location-based, like yourself, would be part of, something like an online platform or, an app that's meant to help folks get out there, get curators in front of your work, but also sell your work, which is what we're really working on. So that is amazing. And one of the questions I always like to ask, we've been doing this for a year, and we did it on Thursday nights because that was the night that, we would always go gallery hopping with Friday and Saturday and Sunday too, but Thursdays was the big one in Chelsea, at least. And with the pandemic and lockdown, I felt what the hell am I going to do now? I want to still talk about art. So we started engaging in these talks. And, one of the questions I'm always interested in knowing is just how did your practice, or has your practice changed since COVID or quarantine? I know things are loosening up now, but, how did your practice have to amend to the shift in being able to leave your house?
Right. I know it's been a really difficult time, and my thoughts are with everybody that's gone through some really struggling, hard times. So, it changed a lot. Most people don't realize. I mean, being a working artist is a very isolating, solitary experience for most people. I do some collaboration and curatorial work that sort of brings me out of my little hovel, my studio, and into the world. But being someone that's used to isolation and working alone, I am pretty used to it. And so surprisingly, I did not make very much work during the pandemic and during quarantine. And I found like really two camps with that, with people I know. Either people made a ton of work or nothing at all. And I was in the nothing at all category, because some people make work just as a practice, as a habit, as a daily routine to express themselves. And I feel like my whole life is a creative expression, every part of it, where I live, how I walk through the world, what I do, what I think about, what I'm reading is all part of the practice. So, and I really don't make work for expression so much as for dialogue. And so important to me. So without that dialogue, without the potential for dialogue, since weren't allowed to really leave our house, and all shows were being canceled and all of this, I didn't really have much desire to make work, right? I don't need to make work for myself. I make work to share with others, to have a dialogue with others, to get a response, to provoke people, to enlighten people, to however people react to my work is fine, but it's really all about, that conversation. So luckily, I do have a big project on the horizon that I'll talk about more at the end. And so I have gone back to school for a second master's, and from Harvard, very, very
Oh,
proud.
okay. I heard of that place before.
And online master's I did, in Massachusetts. So when the pandemic started, or right before it started, I had just started this program, and I thought to myself, how am I going to be able to focus enough to do an online master's with a very busy career and very busy life? And then, unbeknownst to me, it was the perfect time since we were all stuck in the house. So I've been busy working on the second master's from Harvard. And
that's incredible. I know I'm looking forward to hearing more about that, and digesting and getting more information about your work. I know that we're all really looking forward to seeing. I know you couldn't be in your studio today because the Wi-Fi is so crappy. Totally understand. You did prepare some slides for us to look at and kind of get a gander in a chronological way of sorts of some of your practice. And so I'd love if you wanted to start in talking a little. And I know that and for others out there, I'm going to probably interject and ask Alyssa some questions as she's running through the slides, but feel free to throw questions in the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat, and we can ask questions through that as Alyssa's going. We certainly can ask at the end as well. Anyway, let's start looking at some of these sweet stills and other installation shots of some of the work that you've been doing over the last. I mean, you consider yourself an artist now for over 30 years, right?
well, I consider myself a creative person for probably 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely a working artist for, oh goodness, sorry. That is supposed to be at the beginning. Give me just 1 second. Oh, there we go. Hold on a second. having a little trouble with. Okay.
This is from us buzzing through it before we turned on.
So it was at the end, and it was okay.
Well, you're right now in Texas, correct? You said you're kind of based in Detroit and Texas. Do you have a place in Detroit and Texas, or do you have like a friend that you stay with in Detroit or Texas?
No, I have a house in both places. I'm super lucky. So when I left New York, I sort of accidentally moved to Austin, Texas. I had a show here at Collab Projects, which is a great DIY nonprofit arts organization that I've worked with a lot over the years. And then I got asked to stay on and do a performance at the Fusebox Festival. So I was illegally subletting my illegal apartment in Brooklyn, as one does, as you do what you can to survive as an artist in New York City. And I had very cheap rent, and I'd been there a long time, and the landlord really wanted to get rid of me. So when I sublet my place, that was it. And so I ended up in Austin. I have a beautiful, crazy sort of cement bunker, I call it. It's a big loft space filled with art, from friends and bartered and all sorts of things. And I made a film 7 years ago in Detroit, and fell in love with the city of Detroit, and am starting some big projects in Detroit. And I bought a very unloved, forgotten house in the Hubbard Farms neighborhood in the tax auction. And everyone said, what do you think? You're crazy. And now the only crazy part was that I didn't somehow buy like 10 houses in Detroit, but I do have a house, and lovingly over the years, little by little, I've fixed it up. So I rent it out when I'm in Austin, and I usually spend the winter in Texas and the summer in Detroit. So
Good.
yeah, it's been
And I know the Hubbard Farms area. I was born and raised in Detroit, and I lived there for 30 years of my life. So when I mean, we'll get to that part in a minute. I know when, HAINT comes on, we get a little, no, it was TMI, the work that was filmed.
Yeah, both HAINT and TMI. I filmed two movies there. I'm really inspired by Detroit, and I must have lived there in a past life, because man, I don't know what it is. People don't understand it. And I feel like that city either embraces you and won't let go, or rejects you. And man, that city just held me in her arms and is never going to let me go. I love Detroit. But anyway, we could talk about that for hours. But slides, I do, just to let everyone know, I do have a lot of slides, so I'm sorry I'll be going through them kind of quickly. Just jot down a note if you have any question about something, I can answer it later, but I just want to be able to take you through. This is about probably about 16 years of work. Just little examples of different things. I started out as a photographer, and I did get my master's degree through Bard. This is a still from Iceland. A multidisciplinary artist. So I do make films, video, installation, photography, performance, sound, sculpture, usually video photography and sculpture.
So Alyssa, I'm not seeing your screen being shared right now. If you had intended to have your presentation up.
Yes, I do. Thank you for that. I am not sure why I'm having trouble. It works so perfectly when we.
I know. Well, you might need to gather the screens. Sometimes that's a little bit of a buzz, or you can, oh, hey now.
Okay. How's that?
It's brilliant. We got it.
Excellent. Okay, so that is my name, ALYSSA Taylor Wendt. So this was The first slide I was just showing was an example of my photography. I did start out, I was trained as a photographer. I do love photography. I have a lot of issues with photography. And I really struggled with it. This was a program for photography through ICP and chaired by Nayland Blake, who is a wonderful artist and one of the few mentors I've had in my life. And he is really responsible for the direction that my work and career has taken, whether he realizes it or not. And he is, you know, just a wonderful artist as well. So just to go back up just a little bit, this is me in the 90s. So I have always been a creative person, but I didn't really seriously start considering myself an artist or being a practicing artist until probably about 2005, 4, 5. So for many years, I was an underground film actress. I played in rock and roll bands, as you can see here. I ran a vintage clothing store. You know, did all those sorts of things that one does in your 20s. Then, you know, I moved back to New York, went to grad school, and really started taking it seriously. One of the things I really loved about making artwork was the autonomy of it. You know, in a band is like sort of being married without any sort of sexuality. It's sort of like a platonic marriage, very difficult. I had a business with business partners. I was in films written and directed by other people. So there was just so much compromise that I really got excited about doing my own work. So I started staging photographs. This is a really old photograph. I use my family a lot in my work. My mother, who is on this presentation tonight, is there in the center in the back. So I started making staged, what I call staged photographs. So creating like tableau vivants in the old sort of French tradition of theatrical scenery. And I would use sort of costumes, you know, from my years of dealing with antiques and vintage clothes, and create these different scenarios to sort of deal with my issues of photography and ownership of an image. So while I was in school, I started having ideas that didn't really fit into these categories. And so Nayland Blake, as I mentioned, asked me, you know, well, why photography? When I explained to him an idea and how I didn't know how to do it with photography, he said, why photography? And I was like, well, I'm getting a master's in photography. But he was like, you know, do it in performance, do it as a zine, do it as a video. So I started making short videos, and these were very, you know, borrowed camcorders, you know, with friends helping out in someone's backyard. This is my family, that's my niece in the front, you know, staging them and casting them with friends and family, and started to create these micro worlds. Coming from this sort of independent underground film background, I knew a lot about doing something with very little. So making something out of nothing, being able to produce a video or a film with a budget of 0, you know, borrowing clothes, you know, using whatever was at hand. This is from a film called You, the showed in. There is my mother again. She appears in a lot of my work. She's a very good sport and an amazing artist herself. Ann Taylor, she's a painter. So after school, I got a couple of residencies. This one is in Iceland. I worked in Norway and Iceland. And I started, again, just creating these short films and taking photographs. This is a dear friend and artist, Jen Rodewald, that I went to grad school with. And so what I would do, and what I continue to do to this day, is when I make a film, rather than use screen grabs or freeze frames from the video, I stage, what I call production stills. Create a scene that you never see in the movie. So this is a scene you never see in the movie Trifecta, and it was taken with a 4x5 camera. I used to use analog and film cameras. Now I'm very busy, so unfortunately it's all digital at this point. But I still continue to do that and use photography as a way to advent the moving image.
Did you find any influence? This seems like a no-brainer, like throwing the question at you, like I'm answering it, but it's just reminiscent of Cindy Sherman's, entrevue into the photography world with the film stills series. Were you in any way influenced by that, or did you know about those before you started doing these production stills?
I did. I mean, I knew a lot about different, sorry, I don't want to stare at words, so I'm going to leave it on this one instead.
Yeah.
A lot about photography because I studied it and, studied it in school and, loved to look at photography books. And so I think, I'm trying to think, I feel like cinema was more of an influence than photography was. I mean, certainly women using photography as a way to sort of empower their visions and to be able to sort of express their autonomy and feminism. I mean, there's many, many artists, including Cindy Sherman, that influenced me in that way, more in the way art helped them not be sort of oppressed or follow in any traditional trajectory. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I think the work itself didn't. I saw, I mean, this isn't really an influence at all, but just seeing what Matthew Barney did with the Cremaster series and how he worked with props and photographs and film as all part of one project, right? So that really was an interesting way of using film in the art world, right? In the gallery, in a different kind of way like that. But I mean, influences probably Boys, James Lee Byers, Alejandro Jodorowsky, Eva Hess, Steve McQueen, Anselm Kiefer, Mika Rottenberg.
Oh, Mika.
Mika, amazing. And Neo Rauch, who's my favorite. Yeah. Oh my God, my favorite.
Those beauties in real life are really to die for.
Right.
They're so massive.
Massive.
Yeah.
So I will say that I, started right before I left New York. And since I've been in Austin, making a lot of sculpture. So here's an example, light sculptures. This is Icelandic horsehair. I have many different series using Icelandic horsehair inspired by the sort of the way it's prized for its genetics and the sort of beauty and the problematic aspect of that. But also having done a residency in Iceland and being given a bunch of Icelandic horsehair. But I really started, so I'm really very self-taught with sculpture and even with performance art. I was a human maypole in a warehouse in Brooklyn.
Listen, you go back to the horsehair piece really quickly. I have a question about, I find this piece just stunning. Well, first of all, is there smoke being blown around it? Is there some sort of performative aspect, or was that just for the stage shot? Also, are the hairs then tied in those three in the center? And what is it standing on? How is it positioned in terms of like its presentation? As a sculpture, how does one see it in person?
Well, this was a series that I did, and they're in bird cage holders.
Okay.
So it has a big stand, and there would normally be a bird cage hanging in the circle.
Gotcha.
But I like to use reclaimed antiques. I mean, some assemblage work, but I just like to use found objects when I can. It's sort of, I feel like it's a golden
Sure. I
thing
mean,
to do, but so this smoke was just staged. This is at my friend Steve Ellis's house up north. He's a painter in New York. And this was the first one I'd ever done. And the hairs are not tied, they're sort of twirled together. And I just liked all the different references, the sort of orifice aspect of it. There's sort of like a black metal, like dream catcher aspect. And for people that know me well, a lot of my work seems dark. And I've often had, you know, gallerists and art consultants complain that my work is hard to sell because it's so dark. But for people who know me, I mean, the darkness is really a point of humor for me. So when I say this looks like an orifice and a dream catcher, like I'm like, I'm not like, this is a very serious sculpture. I mean, or like laugh, and that's fine. I mean, there is definitely an underlying sense of dark bellows humor in the work. Um, you
It
know,
also feels like a net, or it feels like a butterfly catcher, or it can be a hoop that dolphins go through, tickling them with horsehair. I feel the reference to dark is so subjective, and for all gallerists out there, I'm so sorry that someone tells you something like that. Your work can't sell because it's too dark. Uh, that's unfortunate. That's another conversation for another day in relationship to the market place, and who thinks what will sell to who and why. Anyway, so yes, I just had those things that I needed to get a little closer to this piece, because I was really intrigued. Please go ahead. I like the maypole, the live action maypole, which
I
was next.
want that on my wall here. This is about,
Oh, damn.
so that's another horsehair piece that after the show it was in, I literally put it up in my house because there was no place else to put it. It's enormous. It's like 10 by 18 feet. And that is from that same time period and series. So just had to point it out because it's just, you know, right over my shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say that if you wanted really dark or, grotesque, you could go to Adela Bessemet. You could just let them, deal with them. But anyway, continue. I apologize.
Oh, it's fine. So yeah, so this is a performance piece. I used to do a lot more performance art. And I feel like it was still the leftover actor sort of, you know, guitar player, you know, still getting that last little bit of exhibitionism literally in this piece out of my system. And now I really have no desire to perform anymore. But anyway, it's the, you know, my one naked piece, right? Everyone's jokes that as an artist, you have to do like one, one naked piece or something. But it was necessary for the performance, and very humbling. So this is an interesting, was a project by Nuit Blanche for part of the Bring to Light Festival, where they commissioned artists to work with their materiality or some of their elements with a plexiglass model of the new museum. So I was one of 12 artists projected onto the new museum. So it was sort of they did some sort of mapping thing. So of course I covered mine with horsehair, and I pet and pulled the hair, and then I cut the hair. And I was in very good company. I think Marilyn Minter was one of the other artists. This was probably 2011. And the new museum did make a little cutout, like a paper doll that they sold in the gift shop that was like a model of the new museum, build your own new museum. And every artist got one. So you know, you could build like a hair covered new museum. Anyways, pretty neat. So this was the performance that consequently got me to lose my apartment in New York. It was about that time where I stayed longer in Austin, and it was part of the Fusebox Festival. So in this performance called Magnus Retwined, I basically had the audience stand in a circle around me, and I tied the audience together. They don't really realize that's what's happening. I start out playing 45 records and I tie the strings onto people's leg or their wrist and I crisscross around the circle. And people, are pretty freaked out in the beginning. They feel trapped. This was definitely inspired by my family and my mother, who made mazes for me on Easter Day, string mazes that I had to unwind. So this is sort of taking the opposite. Instead of unwinding the maze, this is me creating the maze. What's interesting is that people lose their sense of panic as they see me starting to sweat and lose breath and get really exhausted and sort of faint. And so their own sense of panic turns into empathy as the maze gets more complicated. And then when I cut everyone free, it becomes a phantom community, like a phantom limb, and people really miss being connected together. So a lot of my work sort of talks about, there it is.
I also have a question about that last piece. What was the duration?
It's only about 20 minutes long, 25 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
Some friends at the time are rating Olympic numbers. So every time I tie someone, they would like rate the gesture from 1 to 10. And, I would continually have to go back and change the record because they were just 45. So it was just the length of one song. So it was creating these obstacles for myself a little bit in a, Dogma 75 way, creating these restrictions. Anyway, it's an interesting experiment. I've done the performance maybe 2 or 3 times, but this was for the Fusebox Festival in Austin. Mm-hmm. And this was a show I had at Collab very early on piece. I used the hair with this photographic series. So here's an example of blending of the mediums. I created these hoods that were supposed to look sort of like marble statuary or pharaoh hoods in a way, or, cloaked beings, this anonymity, and using the horsehair. This one is called High Nauman because it was inspired by Bruce Nauman's The Fountain. But I don't consider this a photograph. I consider it a documentation of a performance with a sculpture. And I know that sounds really like, that sounds like horrible art speak or whatever, but it's just me trying to work out my own problems with photography. I'm not trying to be pretentious. It's just really me trying to redefine what photography could be besides photography.
A lot of folks are redefining what photography is in relationship to the performative, the sculptural. And I was going to ask about the hood or the sculptural aspect that is being worn by the subject. What is the material? And it has this faint, like, vascular quality. And is it painted? Is it like photo manipulated, or what's going on with that?
Yeah. So in general, my photographs are not photoshopped, except maybe a little bit for, light and shadow or something like that. I don't do a lot of super manipulation of any of the photographs. It is 7 layers of latex that was cut into a pattern that I made for this sort of like weird druid hood thing, and sewn together with invisible thread. And I did paint the veins on in a middle layer. So the same way your veins look under your skin, kind of faint and like underneath your epidermis, it was meant to look like that. And it was modeled after my own skin. It's not meant to represent skin in general, obviously, but just my own. And that is not corn, those are teeth. And this is inspired by, of course, the dream that everybody has about losing your teeth. So a lot of people have this dream. So I use a lot of universal symbolism, for lack of a better word, as portals for people to enter the work. So, you know, if somebody says, oh, I had a dream like that, it's not that they have the right answer or by any means. It's just that they then have a portal in which to enter the work. They have something they can personally identify. So a lot of my work has a lot of reference points and a lot of things like ash and salt and things like that. And those are just invitations for people to bring their own stories, their own narrative, their own family, you know, legends, their own, you know, literature, whatever, to the piece. So I like when people are sort of arguing about what my work is about.
Well, it's interesting. I really appreciate that you're, you know, using terms like the ash, the salt, you know, creating a space that invites, you know, a gateway to your viewer in relationship to mysticism. In fact, just last week I was talking to Alex Twaniak, who had made this tarot card about these very things for cancer patients and people going through the grief of losing someone from cancer. But really, we were also addressing this idea of mysticism. And I was just kind of realizing that perhaps that darkness that whomever is telling you your work is unsaleable or therefore difficult is potentially because of the fear of that other, that within mysticism and within that the hair and other objects of talismans and brujeria otherwise, you know, how that could be the fearful thing or that subjective darkness that might be referred to. It's just a kind of idea out there, is that which folks don't understand or perhaps feel intimidated by.
It's true. I mean, it's 100% true. And I feel like part of my duty as an artist, I mean, just the way I see the world, is to bring beauty to the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So to introduce the magic and the sense of possibility to that which is hidden, or that which is in the shadows, or that which is dark, the beauty in, you know, mortality, in transformation, in loss, in, and, you know, I, you know, if you saw the work and all the art in my house by myself and many, many other amazing artists, it's all individually pretty dark. You know, they're all pretty like, whoa, loaded and strange and everything. But if you actually came over to my house, it is the most colorful Moroccan rugs. I mean, it's, you know, yes, all this art is really dark, but my house is actually very cheerful. So I really wish that the commercial art world would get more on this tip of being less decorous, and less trendy, and more delving into things that provoke and promote dialogue, conversation, ideas, intelligence, the unknown, you know. And I really think that I would be a lot less skeptical of some of the things going on in the art world if that was, you know, I as an opportunity. And if I could clone myself, I would do that. I would be open a gallery and champion this kind of avenue for things. But I would love to move on because I feel like there are so many slides, and
Of course, and it's true Carolina style. I gotta stop you and just have these deep thoughts for a moment. Yet, so this mobile that you're presenting here has, and it looks like it has a lot of natural elements hanging from this calder, like, you know, balance. What is on there? What are dangling from?
well, I thought I had another picture of a mobile on there, but I don't think it made it onto the slideshow. So I do make mobiles. They're all sort of different versions of the same mobile, which is called Idresel, which is the sort of Scandinavian and Nordic tree of life. It is a very occult mysticism reference. And I use, the mobiles are topically whatever I'm working with at the time. This was a commission in Norway. And this one was a lot about memory and form, and sort of ancient references. There were a lot of natural elements like moss and metal and wood and wool and what else is on there? Books and underwear and gloves and crystals and just sort of a crazy hodgepodge of things I was reading about and talking about and thinking about. There have been 2 other versions of this. One was about rebuilding my house in Detroit. And the person that helped me rebuild the house, it was about the sort of fixing of a structure with the potential dissolution of a friendship relationship and the sort of the yin and yang of that moment. I made a 3rd version of this that was called the ex voto edition that was right after Trump, he who shall not be named, took office. And it was about healing and pain and conflict. So I'm just going to sort of move on to some other projects. I hope people save questions for me for later. So speaking of healing, a lot of work that I make is meant to be sort of provocative and ends up being about healing. It just happens that way. It sort of annoys me sometimes, but it's my truth coming out, of the work. So this was a solo show I had in 2016 at Women in Their Work, which is an all women run, women founded for women artists who are still underrepresented in the art world. I had to just say that, throw that out there. And they do wonderful programming there and let people really take a lot of risks. So it was a huge space. They are very supportive of my work. This is called Urgear. So URGEAR, and I made a series of shamanistic accessories and armor out of old sports equipment. So the idea that sort of primitive ritual and sporting events go through a lot of the same rituals. So I was sort of trying to sort of bolster up this idea of ancient rituals and sort of bring down this sort of fanaticism about sports and connect it with something that nobody would normally associate it with. So what I did was, these are some of the individual objects. Again, like I said, definitely a sense of humor coming through the work, hopefully. And what I did was I took 18 creative leaders and creators from around the greater Austin area. And I asked them to tell me a personal story of something that they had transgressed or had to overcome in terms of their sexuality. So they told me a story which I kept private, and from what they told me, I armed them with what I thought was the appropriate armor from the Urgear series, and then I took their photograph.
So all of the work that was on that wall initially in the Woman Gallery, it had already served as a prop for
right.
Your future photographs. I was going to ask, like, were these worn? Were they tried out? Were they imbued with any energy? I value that. So so then with each object, you have its own still.
So some of the objects were in more than one photograph. This is Julia Halprin. She is a wonderful filmmaker. And this is Betty McConan, who is an artist and curator in Austin. So I showed these photographs at the show with the Urgear. And then in the center, this was sort of a trophy stand. And I had all these sort of sexual totems. So this is another example of experiments with sculpture with clay and latex and silicone and salt licks. That big egg on the top is a carved salt lick. And then there are little trophy plaques around the outside. So again, what was supposed to be addressing sexuality ended up being a very healing process for myself and all these people I worked with. Working still the latex and silicone, like the hood. This was a silicone rug called Swept Under. And it is 8 layers of silicone, again, with the painted veins, painted with dyed silicone, and Chinese horsehair on the ends. And the lump that's under the rug there, referring to swept under, like when something is swept under the rug, was a year's worth of the New York Times rubber band that came around my newspaper. And wrapped up in there are little pieces of paper with 11 secrets about me. So I started to work a lot with the idea of secrets and hidden history and buried truths and unrevealed narratives, something that has really pervaded my current work and my plans for the future. I'm still doing performances. This was Katie Cowles is an artist, a wonderful performance artist in Austin. And she asked different people to come and work with this giant lotus blossom where we were performing torch songs made popular by Latina singers. And we could sort of work with presence and absence and close the petals or open them while we were performing. This was a performance I did with ESPTV, if you guys are familiar.
Victoria Cuddy.
Yes, Victoria is an old
friend. I'm close with Victoria. That's awesome. I didn't realize you had to collaborate with them. What year was this?
This was probably 2013, maybe.
So it's a Green Point.
This was at the Museum of Art and Design.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
And they asked some people to come. So I sang a cappella Nina Simone's version of Work Song. And I had 32 pairs of gloves on my hands, covered, of course, by these giant Mickey Mouse hands. And so I sort of went through the audience as I sang Work Song, dragging these sort of bones and little buildings behind me tied to my legs. And then I had the audience pull off all the gloves. It was a little bit of an excruciating performance, but I was just so happy to work with those guys. They're really amazing. And this might have been one of the last performances I did. Definitely not in my wheelhouse these days. So I will say one thing that happened was I joined the ICOSA Collective. So we are a 20-person artist collective in Austin. And we do 2-person shows. Mostly of members. We also trade shows with other art collectives. We do stuff for the community. We sponsor things. We do fundraisers. I mean, it's a really amazing collective. And we have a gallery space that is 100% artist run. We do everything from the build out to the programming to the advertising. We pay the rent with the dues. We run our own gift shop. I mean, it's a lot of work and a really wonderful thing in my life. So I have now done 4 shows with them, all with women. Interesting, we're a co-ed collective. So I'm going to show some pieces from different shows I did. This was from a show with an artist named Elaine Eling Shen. And this is a giant 8-foot in diameter sculpture called Orb. That was sort of like a burst beehive. And it has a metal frame. It's a very complex structure. We had 13 pieces in this show, all collaborative. And for those of you that haven't collaborated that much, it is an excellent exercise in throwing your ego out the window and learning how to listen to another creative person with very strong opinions. Elaine and I also did this book called Divination Station. It's a fortune-telling book inspired by an old piece I had made for Pulse Artfare 10 years earlier. So you open the book to a page, you hold it reverently, you open the book to a page, tear out the page against all of your instincts that you're not supposed to tear pages out of books, and go away with a fortune. So it's a really fun interactive piece. I love being able to have interactive art pieces. And I still go over to people's houses here in Austin and see a crumpled page from this book up on their refrigerator, which is awesome. So all the quotes were like Black Sabbath lyrics, Carl Sagan quotes, old Latin proverbs, all sorts of stuff like that. Another collaborative show I did, this is the old ICOSA space before holding out. I did with Erin Cunningham, who's a wonderful metal worker. And we had some of our own pieces and collaborative pieces. The giant bunch of wings in the middle with the pile of ash is like called Phoenix Rising. And we made all these giant wing molds and molded it out of acrylic and plexiglass and metal and feathers, and it was a wild project. And so it was fun. We got to work with, we have very different practices. I had another, since they had sold the building, we also smashed a bunch of holes and made art pieces. You see there's a little number over here. That was actually an art piece, just the empty space. So we got to like smash up the art space before the doors.
It is awesome.
Took
Let's
a
go over, got about 7-8 minutes left. So I want to get to TMI and HAINT.
Okay.
So maybe let's work through these a little faster. I know this is the curatorial and the collective, which is very important, but I definitely want to get that before 7.
Okay, I'm going to just breeze through these. Photographs that were ripped up and glued back together and then gilded like kintsugi. I've done a lot of curatorial work. This was a 63 artist and performer show I did with Sean Gallagher from Collab Projects in 2017. This is an installation I did in the basement called Lost Vessels, talking about burials and death and transformation. This is the centerpiece was a light box. So it took me 6 years to make this project HAINT. It's a 3-channel video installation that premiered at the Visual Arts Center here at UT Austin. These are various stills. So like in the earlier work, I did a lot of staged production stills. So these are scenes that you never see in the movie. Many of these performers are friends of mine or became friends of mine. This is Joseph Keckler, who is an amazing, amazing performer.
I actually know him. I was his advisor at the University of Michigan. When I started going through your own website, you know, and I was looking at HAINT and I was like, oh my gosh, he's just brilliant. It must have been such a pleasure to work with him.
He is my muse, and I saw him perform at Abrams Art Center, and I just found him and asked him to be in my project, and we started working together, and I said, I need you to play Death in this movie I'm filming in Detroit. And he said, I'm from Michigan. And I said, you have no lines. I want you to sing German opera. And so anyway, I love him so much. He's an incredible, masterful performer.
He's really come so far too. I mean, he came into art school and then he just found Holly Hughes and just started following her performance mentorship. And yeah, he really made his own way through that program. I was really impressed. And now he's, I suppose, super famous for his operatic interpretations of sorts.
He's wonderful. And I graciously call him my muse, and I can't wait to work with him again. But those of you lucky enough to be in New York, please go see him perform when all of this pandemic hell is over with. So I filmed HAINT in Detroit, Texas, and Croatia. I filmed a lot of spomenics, which were these socialist, brutalist monuments built by Tito that are very problematic and loaded structures. I worked and cast all local people in the film, which was very difficult and extremely rewarding. Here's my wonderful mother again as the alchemical crone in the burnt high desert near her cabin in Northwest Arizona. Here is an installation shot at the Visual Arts Center. Each screen is about 13 to 15 feet wide. The whole piece is about 35 minutes. No, my films are not available online. And I really hope to somehow show one of these film projects in New York. So I'm open to any sort of curatorial suggestions or opportunities, because they are labors of love and about cycles of history and about the aftermath of conflict and about memory. And there is metal in the soundtrack. And anyway, I really am super proud of this film and everyone that collaborated with me that worked on it. I got to also have a separate room with 18 giant mural photographs and a bronze and sort of a Wunderkammer sculpture. So this is the first and only bronze I've made yet. I really love it, as you can tell in this photograph. And this really inspired me to go on and create some other films. So this is, HAINT did win the International Istanbul Experimental Film Festival. So I'm very proud of that. It doesn't really fit into a lot of film festivals. It's really meant for galleries and museums.
I wanted to ask Alyssa quickly, how long was it? Was 3 channels, so they were all playing simultaneously in the space, correct? And then the sound was a Dolby, like it was all the sound together, and it just kind of took turns.
Well,
Correct.
all 3 synced together, not just separately. It's very precise syncing. So they were edited as a 3 channel. And there's a lot of fade to black to give them a rest.
Right.
So it's not just total cacophony, chaos.
Right.
So there's a lot of fading to black. And the sound is the same, so it's inter-edited. So it is sound from all 3, and there are at some points 32 layers of sound. So it is ambient, it is music, it is singing, it is ganga singers, it is sound effects, it is overdubs, it is voiceovers, it is lav mic. I mean, you know, wind sound effects. I mean, everything, and everything is very nuanced. So there are 6 speakers. So each channel is in stereo, and it is synced, interlayered sound.
It sounds well, very elaborate and well timed, and certainly precise and strategic in its making and editing. I was wondering, had you ever seen the Marian Simonet that was at the New Museum maybe like 3 years ago? It was 5 channels, very similar format only, just with the on and the off and the similar. But I was wondering, did you already say how long it was, HAINT, all 3 channels?
Yeah, so it's about 38 minutes long. It depends with the credits or not, because the credits are very long, and I am very adamant about crediting every single person that worked on my projects, and try and pay everyone, and thank you Cultural Arts Funding from the City of Austin for giving me grants over the years, which is part of the reason they take me so long to make.
Well, it's incredible that they also gave you the space to have a physical show with the stills and the bronze, and to have the work being presented in a gallery setting. That's really quite amazing. And then this film, the second short film that you've done, TMI, and this is a still.
Stands for the memory inheritance, and this is about inherited memory. I'm going to go through, again, these are the stage production stills while I'm talking about it, just so we can get all my slides. This was filmed primarily in Detroit and Flint, and a little bit in Texas, all in abandoned commercial spaces. So it takes the concept of inherited memory, which is the idea that we don't just inherit DNA from our ancestors, but also trauma and failure and love and magic and habits and triumphs and fear. And these things all come through, can skip many generations and come through. And I believe in nature and nurture, but I'm adding a sort of third possibility, which is that your personality and your life is influenced by, the butterfly effect, by things that your ancestors experienced, for better or for worse. And so how do you make an experimental art film about this? With great difficulty. And I basically took the Jungian concept of a building. So in his dream symbology, he talks about a building being a symbol for the spirit or the soul. So I filmed in 22 different interior spaces and edited them together so it looks like one endless interior space. So it's sort of like you're going through an infinity mirror, right, of inherited memory. So what interests me about this too is that this is something that everyone has, part of our collective conscious in this world. So this transgresses like race, class, experience, upbringing, opportunity, everything. Everyone has this because we all have ancestors and they all experienced wonderful and horrible things. And so this is very interesting to me, this kind of dialogue that we could have across cross-culturally. And so what I did was I had all these different performers, all the kinds of things I love: gospel singing, tap dancing, American Sign Language, trumpet playing, modern dance, whistling, you know, all these sort of quirky types of performing. And they are all in the peripheral vision as you go through this endless interior space. And they're all performing a version of the same 4 songs. So I'm going to leave it at that because that's already a lot to take in. So I just finished it. This is a little less complicated than the 3-channel. It is a single channel, 34 minutes long, currently on view in Austin at my collective's gallery, the ICOSA Collective Gallery in East Austin. And it is a 2-person show, 2-woman show with Brooke Gassio. So all of the work in the show is about inhabited forms and mnemonic residue, meaning sort of the residue of memory, of spirit, of energy, of like heritage, of our past, of, you know, empty spaces, right? Architectural residue, sculptural residue, even art residue, you know, what remains and what stories that can tell and how that still contains energy. So I'm a big animist. I believe in the energy of us. This is the thing on here. This is a new ceramic series, never worked in ceramics before, modeled after canopic jars, and they have Stanhope viewers in them. So the peephole in the middle, basically when you look inside, these are all about, you know, 10 to 18 inches high. They all show an image that's looking through the peephole. They all have an image of the rest of them. So the cat, for instance, has an image of the rest of them. And it's sort of a Walt Whitman idea, like I contain multitudes. The idea is very much inspired by the isolation of the pandemic, that we carry those that we love within us. So we carry those around us, inside of us. So even when you couldn't see people, your friends and your family during the pandemic, you still know that you have them inside you somewhere, you know, whole, you know. So this is sort of a, you know, an extension of this idea of inherited memory. And I know we're just whizzing through everything super quick. So this show will be up through May 8th with my work with Brooke Gassio. The show is called Vessel. And should I just talk about the very last thing here? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we're a little over. Folks are still sticking around. I like to close it up, you know, right at 19, but I want to know more about this Museum of Cultural Artifacts. I want to know where it is, when it's opening, how can I get invited to the VIP list?
Well, yeah, so anyone that has to leave, please, it's not rude. You can totally sign off, but we will keep talking for a little.
We're almost to the very end.
But please, any questions? I do love questions. So as a little bit of a transition point, I told you I was in school. I'm in school at Harvard for museum studies. And as a continuation of basically everything that my work has been about all these years, I am opening a museum for cultural artifacts in Detroit, Michigan. Very excited about this. How do you start a museum? All my friends ask, how do you start a museum? I have no idea. I'll let you know after I open it. So I am looking for allies. I'm looking for people that are interested, people that want to work there, people that want to help out. It's going to be a real museum, about 15, 20,000 square foot building in Detroit. I do not have a space yet. I have been collecting esoteric objects for 30 years. So there is no museum like this in the United States. It's basically going to be cultural artifacts. So things that provoke interesting conversations, like I'm talking about, this dialogue I'm always looking for. So everything from hand-carved coffins from Ghana to beaded Masonic banners to 1700s chastity belts to sideshow banners showing a half man, half woman. You know, things that provoke topical conversations. So it's going to be all this sort of neat stuff that a lot of my friends and collectors, we love, unusual stuff that you don't see in most museums. But most importantly, there is a huge educational outreach and community component, which is very important to me. So I basically want to teach kids about non-monetary value. So I want to teach them that maybe the iPhone that they have isn't their most valuable thing, because you could just buy another one. Planned obsolescence, you know, these objects today, it's not just all about monetary value. So I'm going to be claiming, talking to a group of high school kids, hey, do your parents have some broken plate that's glued back together that belonged to your great grandmother in the living room that you don't understand why they have? Well, actually, there's probably a story behind that. And that story is part of your cultural heritage. That's part of your family's story. That's part of the narrative. That is part of an unwritten history. And that is actually way more valuable than an iPhone, right? Because you can't replace it. So I want to encourage like community to do, we're going to have heritage days with like show and tell with objects. I'm going to give a lot of tours. There's going to be a lot of research into different objects, a lot of school groups, a lot of conversation about what things mean, what kids think about things, why is that important, why is that valuable, and how things relate to issues that we're dealing with today, right? With history that has been buried or compromised or told by the victors or whatever. This is, you know, important cultural history, and believing in the energy of objects, animism, and the stories that objects can tell. And they're also just cool, you know, cool stuff. You know, so it is still information right now. I'm still sort of formulating the prospect memos for benefactors. I am still looking for the right building, but things are definitely underway. We are an official 501c3. We're making a lot of plans. Things are starting to come together. And so I invite you all to come and check out this museum that I'm creating to create cultural legacy for not me, but for everyone, and opening this up to a much bigger audience than I think my art project has been able to. And that's been frustrating for me. And so I think this will live on for a couple hundred years and also be a place where people can bequeath collections or objects in their wills, you know, and know that it's going to go to a safe place where it is preserved and seen. It's taken care of, and it will be seen, not just in somebody's house, not just in some storage place, but it will be seen and talked about and researched and used to like have dialogue. So I'm super stoked.
Incredible. That's incredible, Alyssa. I'm looking forward to maybe you could unshare your screen so I could just see you one last time before you close up. um, hi, thank you so much for sharing all of that. The cultural artifacts in Detroit, that's very ambitious. I know doable and needed. I think that the population demographics there, as well as around the country, you're going to get some really wild things. I really look forward to learning more about it and certainly getting back in touch with you about um, where it's going to, you know, the timeline and all that stuff, and where it's going to be. But
Well, people always assume it's going to be an art museum because I've been, you know, a very busy artist all these years. But if anyone who knows my work and knows what my work is about, it's not really a big surprise because it's kind of just continuing on that same exploration, you know, that same.
cultural, yeah, the object itself, as you know, you meander through even describing your work as, you know, the sculpture or the object within the photograph, you know, and it does that resonance or the residual energy that you're discussing in so many of the concepts within your work. It seems like a beautiful transition to, you know, begin to show that work and present it in museum quality, those embedded objects, embedded with energy, right? Um, this is just so wonderful. I'm so glad we had 30 folks here at one point listening and being able to see your work. I really look forward to potentially witnessing and experiencing HAINT and TMI. So, you know, I'll certainly keep Artfare posted. We'll get that information out there. And thank you everyone for being here tonight and showing up and listening. If you missed any of the conversation, I'll upload it as usual in the next few days on our YouTube. But Alyssa, thank you for all of your energy, putting that out there. I tried to get in a couple questions here and there, but I know you had a lot of stuff going on, and there's so much more I want to talk to you about. We'll just have to do it in a private way a little later.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carolina, for having me, and to Artfare, and for everyone that joined today. I'm sorry we didn't get room for questions, but my website is just my name, ALYSSATaylorWenT.com, and you can always reach out to me via the website or through Artfare, I suppose, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sorry I talk a lot, I know, but there's a lot.
You're great, man. This was a breeze for me. I had tons of questions for you. I didn't even get to, but it was really exciting to hear more about your process. And certainly a lot of the work that you showed today is on Artfare and able for anyone to look at it more in depth and certainly purchase. You know, even with our augmented reality feature, you can even see what it looks like on your wall. And anyway, I'm really happy that you filled out your profile recently because you've got a lot of stuff on there that's really great, and a lot of different price points too, which was it's always good. You never know, 1,200 to 20,000.
Yeah.
Or is there an 80,000? Did I see as well?
I think that might be for HAINT, but I just, I mean, to be completely honest, that was, I haven't sold HAINT, and it is a big thing to take on. So I
Yeah.
figured more of something a museum might be interested in rather than somebody for their apartment. But you never know. People have apartments.
Well, thank you again. I'm going to sign off. I really appreciate everyone here, and happy spring, and see you next week. Ciao. Peace.
Thank you.